The sun hadn't even cleared the ridgeline when she came riding through the mist, pale light brushing her face like a ghost that hadn't made up its mind about staying. Her horse was spent, breath steaming in the dawn chill. Dust clung to the hem of her dress, to the small silver cross around her neck. In her right hand she held a revolver, not like a weapon but like a confession. Caleb Holt stepped out from the barn, sleeves rolled, hay sticking to his shoulders. He hadn't seen her in 2 years. 2 years since the night she'd ridden off with another man, a railroad contractor, out of Santa Fe who'd promised her silken safety. 2 years since she'd told Caleb she was done living in the dust. Now she stood there again, trembling, her breath fogging the morning air. "Caleb," she said quietly, almost swallowed by the silence. "I need you." He didn't move, didn't blink. The only sound was the steady creak of the barn door in the wind. Her hand shook as she extended the Colt toward him. "It's his," she whispered. The words hung heavy. He looked at the gun, nickel-plated engraved on the barrel. Too fine to belong to a ranch hand. Too clean for this valley. Caleb reached out, took it slow, as if the gun itself might bite. The metal was cold, polished, and smelled faintly of whiskey and blood. "Whose blood?" he asked. Her eyes fell. "I don't know," she said, voice barely there. "But they'll be looking for me by noon." He stared at her, the woman he'd once planned to marry, now standing like a ghost from a life that had burned down. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and rain from the north, the kind of smell that comes before trouble. Caleb turned, motioned her inside the barn. "Get off the road," he said. "We'll talk when you can breathe again." She hesitated, then led the horse in. Her boots hit the dirt softly, each step sounding like regret. Inside it was dim and quiet, only the crackle of light through the slats and the low groan of timber. Caleb poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. She drank like someone who'd been crossing deserts in her own head. "You still don't lie worth a damn," he said, eyes hard but not cruel. Her lip trembled. "I'm not lying, Caleb, I ran. I had to." He leaned against the post, the revolver heavy in his hand. "From who?" Her eyes darted to the barn door. "From him." "From what he did?" "From what I helped him do." The pause that followed was long enough to feel like a prayer. Outside, a crow landed on the fence post, cawing once, sharp, cutting through the stillness. Caleb holstered the gun at his hip, out of habit more than trust. "You don't get to come back here dragging someone else's sins and expect me to—" "I didn't come for forgiveness," she said, voice breaking. "I came because you're the only man who won't hand me over." That stopped him cold. There was a weight to her words. Something desperate, something final. He looked at her, really looked at her now. The torn dress, the raw skin around her wrists, the exhaustion carved beneath her eyes. Whatever had happened, it hadn't been gentle. "I don't owe you," he said quietly. She nodded. "I know, but you're still you." A horse neighed somewhere in the distance. Caleb's eyes narrowed toward the eastern hills, faint dust rising, no more than a whisper against the light. Riders, maybe, or just the wind stirring ghosts. He felt the old ache return, the kind that doesn't come from muscles but from years of trying not to care. He walked to the barn door, staring out at the road. The valley was empty for now, the kind of empty that never lasts. Behind him, she said softly, "If they find me here, they'll kill you too." Caleb didn't turn around. "Then we best figure out why they're coming," he said, voice low. He pushed the door open wider, letting the dawn pour in. "Start from the beginning," he said. "And don't leave out the parts that hurt." Her voice trembled as she began, each word dragging through the quiet like spurs over stone. "I thought I could live without you, Caleb, but I didn't know what I was trading for." The morning sun rose slow and cruel, stretching shadows across the valley as the first sound of distant hoofbeats began to echo off the canyon walls. And for the first time in 2 years, Caleb Holt reached for a gun that wasn't his, because the woman who broke his heart had brought death to his doorstep. The sound of those hoofbeats never reached the ranch that morning. Not yet. But they stayed in Caleb's mind like thunder that hadn't decided where to strike. She sat by the stall, the horse half fed, half dead from the run. The light from the cracks in the barn roof caught her face, streaked with dirt and something like shame. Caleb knelt near the water trough, running his fingers along the revolver's engraving. EML. Fine curling letters. Whoever this man was, he wasn't a drifter. He was the kind of man who sent others to do his killing. He looked up. You rode 2 counties with this gun in your saddle and no one stopped you? I rode at night, she said. And I didn't stop for anything. He didn't ask how long she'd been running. He could see it in her, the hollow look, the kind that only comes from sleeping with one eye open. Tell me what happened, he said. She hesitated, her hands twisting together. His name's Elijah Mercer. You've heard it, I'm sure. Caleb's jaw tensed. Everyone in the territory had heard of Mercer. Railroad contracts, land seizures, a man who built his fortune by breaking others. You left me for him, he said flatly. Her eyes flicked up, wet. I left because I was tired of losing, Caleb. Tired of watching your hands bleed over land that'd never love you back. He said I could be something more than a rancher's ghost. Caleb said nothing, just looked down at the gun again. He came home 3 nights ago, she whispered. Drunk, angry. Said someone was stealing from his shipment lines, accused me of knowing. He hit me. Her voice broke, but she forced it steady. When I woke, there was blood on the floor and his man was gone. Mercer said he'd handle it before morning, but he didn't come back, just that gun, and I knew. I knew it was bad. Caleb leaned back against a post, eyes hard. So you ran. Brought the evidence here. I didn't know where else to go. He stared past her through the crack of the barn where sunlight was turning gold. Outside, a hawk circled slow, waiting for something to die. You think he's dead? He asked. I don't know. Maybe, she said. But if he is, they'll hang me for it. Caleb set the Colt down on the workbench, slow and careful. You realize what you've done by bringing that thing here? She didn't answer. He walked a few paces, the barn boards creaking under his boots. If Mercer's men come looking, they won't care who pulled the trigger. They'll burn this place to the ground just to make a point. Her lip trembled. Then let me go. I'll leave before... No, he cut in, sharper than he meant. You won't make it a mile. They'll smell your tracks before the sun's up proper. She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment all the years between them vanished. He remembered that look. The night she'd told him goodbye, she'd had the same fire in her eyes, only this time it was fear, not pride. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Town'll hear soon enough. Someone'll come asking questions. Sheriff doesn't take kindly to strangers bringing blood over the ridge. She swallowed hard. Then what will you do? Caleb looked at her, the woman who'd left him for a man with clean hands and a black soul, and felt the old ache again. He wanted to send her away, wanted to let her reap what she'd sown, but the tremor in her hands wouldn't leave his mind. Neither would the cut on her cheek or the rawness in her voice when she said, I need you. He exhaled, long and slow. You can stay here till I figure what's real. But if you're lying, I'm not, she said quickly. I swear it. He turned, walked to the shelf, and took down a small pouch of cartridges. You better hope that's true, he murmured. By noon, smoke was rising on the horizon, black, thick, curling from the direction of Santa Fe Road. Caleb's neighbor, old Ben Kramer, rode up fast, dust trailing his mare. Holt, you seen anyone come through here? Caleb stepped out, blocking the barn door. Not a soul. Why? Ben pulled his hat off, sweat streaking his brow. Words traveling fast. Mercer's dead. Shot clean through the chest in his own house. They're saying a woman was seen riding north before dawn. Caleb's hand brushed the revolver under his coat. Can't say I've seen any women riding. Alone this morning, he said evenly. Ben squinted at him, suspicious. You'd tell me if you did, right? They're coming this way with trackers. Ain't safe to be on the wrong side of that kind of money. Caleb nodded once. I'll keep my eyes open. When Ben rode off, Caleb turned back toward the barn. The woman stood in the shadows, trembling. You shouldn't have lied for me, she said. Caleb holstered the gun again. Maybe not, he said quietly. But I wasn't about to let the devil finish what he started. Outside, the smoke kept rising. Inside, the silence between them grew heavier than the gun that bound their fates together. By dusk, the sky had turned the color of bruised copper. Caleb stood on the porch, watching the horizon as the smoke drifted apart into streaks. The wind was changing, carrying the faint sound of horses, too many for travelers, too slow for riders at peace. He lit a lantern and hung it by the door, though he didn't need the light. He needed the illusion of calm. Inside the cabin, she sat near the window, her hands still raw from gripping the reins. The shadows climbed across her face like guilt itself. She hadn't spoken much since Ben Kramer's visit. Neither had he. When the first hoofbeats reached the valley, Caleb felt them through the floorboards before he heard them. A low, steady rhythm that tightened his chest. He walked to the barn, sliding the door open just enough to see the outline of 3 riders coming down from the ridge. They rode like men on a mission, dark coats, wide hats, rifles slung low. Mercer's men, he muttered. She appeared behind him, pale in the half-light. You don't know that. I do, he said quietly. I've seen that kind of riding before. Hired hands with orders they don't question. Her voice trembled. What will you do? He looked at her, the lantern glow catching the gold flecks in her tired eyes. Same thing I always do when trouble comes looking. Stand still and pray it passes by. He took the revolver she'd brought and checked the cylinder. Only 4 rounds. Outside, the riders slowed as they reached the fence line. One dismounted, bent low, and ran his fingers through the dirt, tracking prints, counting steps. Caleb's heart sank. They'd found the trail. The tallest of the 3 called out, his voice cutting clean through the still air. Evenin', Holt. Heard you've been keeping company out here. Caleb stepped out from the barn, calm, hands visible. Ain't kept company with anyone but my horse, mister. The man laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. That so? Shame? We're looking for a woman. Rode through these parts this morning. Pretty thing, red shawl, small horse. Caleb's expression didn't flinch. Ain't seen her. The man's grin widened. You always were loyal, Holt. Mercer used to talk about that. Said you were the kind of man who'd rather drown than give up what's yours. That name hit like a lash, but Caleb didn't show it. Mercer's dead, he said flatly. The man tilted his head. Maybe, but the money he owed still breathes, and the people who worked for him aim to collect. He nodded to the others, who began to circle the property slow, eyes sharp, fingers resting near triggers. Inside the cabin, she pressed herself against the wall, watching through the crack in the wood. Her breath came quick, shallow. Caleb's voice stayed steady. If I see her, I'll send word. Appreciate that, the tall man said, but his tone was thick with disbelief. He spat into the dirt. Still reckon we'll take a look around for peace of mind. Caleb's jaw tensed. You got a warrant? The man smirked. You think paper means something out here? He moved forward, hand on his holster, but then he stopped, because Caleb didn't move an inch. For a moment, the only sound was the wind through the dry grass. Caleb's voice dropped, low and even. You step foot past that fence without cause, you're trespassing, and you know what happens to trespassers on Holt land. The other man's grin faltered. There was something in Caleb's eyes, not anger, not even defiance. Just a kind of stillness that came from men who'd already buried too much. After a long pause, the rider exhaled. We'll be back, he said. You think on what's smart before then. They turned their horses, spurring off toward the ridge, dust rising behind them. Caleb waited until they were gone, then went back inside. She was standing by the window, trembling. They'll come again, she whispered. Yeah, he said. But next time they won't knock. She stared at him. You shouldn't have lied again. You'll hang with me if they find me here. He looked at her, eyes hard but quiet. Maybe. But I reckon I sleep better helping the wrong person for the right reason than the other way around. For a long moment, neither spoke. The night had settled heavy, the air thick with the promise of rain or ruin. Caleb sat down by the fire, loading the revolver with the few rounds he had left. You said he hit you, he murmured. You sure that was all he did? She hesitated. The firelight caught the tears she tried to hide. No, she whispered. He took everything good I ever had, and I helped him do it. Caleb stared into the flames, the orange glow flickering across his face. Then you understand what kind of men are coming. They don't stop till they're sure there's nothing left to burn. Thunder rolled in the distance, faint and slow. He stood and walked to the window, watching the storm crawl across the plains. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow, we decide how much this place is worth to save." Outside, lightning split the horizon, brief and violent, and in that flash he saw 3 more riders cresting the far hill. The danger wasn't coming. It was already here. The storm broke before sunrise. Rain came in hard sheets, hammering the tin roof, washing the dust into thick brown rivers that bled down the hill. The sound of thunder swallowed everything else, the hoofbeats, the wind, even the fear that had settled in the walls. Caleb had been awake all night, boots still on, rifle across his knees. The fire had burned down to embers. Every time the lightning cracked, he saw her sitting by the table, head bowed, hair hanging in damp strands over her face. When dawn finally pushed through the rain, she spoke. Her voice was hoarse, as if each word had to fight its way out. "I didn't mean for him to die." Caleb didn't move. "You sure he did?" She nodded slowly. "I saw the blood. Too much to walk away from." He looked at her then, eyes tired but sharp. "And you're telling me you didn't pull that trigger?" Her breath hitched. "No, but I loaded the gun. He told me to clean it, said we'd be riding at dawn to settle with some rancher he'd cheated. I was scared. I left the gun on the table, and when I came back it was done." Caleb leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath him. "So you ran." She met his eyes, tears burning through the dirt on her cheeks. "Wouldn't you?" He didn't answer. Not with words. He just looked away, because the truth was sitting heavy in his chest. He'd run once too. From the war, from the things he'd seen and done under a flag that didn't care who lived under it. The rain softened to a steady hiss. "I told myself he was good," she whispered. "Told myself money made men better. That if I just smiled through it, if I just learned how to belong in that kind of world, I could forget where I came from." Caleb's eyes lifted slowly. "And where was that?" She gave a small, sad smile. "Right here, in this valley, with you." The silence that followed was a different kind of heavy. Not fear, not guilt, but memory. The kind that comes with ghosts that never left. He rose and crossed to the shelf, pulling down a small tin box. Inside was a photograph, old edges curling, the tintype faded but clear enough. 2 figures, a younger Caleb and her, smiling in front of the same cabin. She reached out with trembling fingers. "You kept it." "Couldn't bring myself to throw it away," he said quietly. Her eyes filled. "You should have." He studied her for a moment, then said, "If I did, I'd have to pretend you never mattered. And that kind of lie don't sit right." A long breath shuddered through her chest. "You were always better than me." Caleb shook his head. "No. Just slower to learn." Lightning flashed again, bright enough to show the outline of horses down in the gully. Still, silent, waiting. The riders hadn't left. They'd just been waiting for the rain to cover their approach. She saw them too. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They'll come soon." Caleb nodded. "Yeah, but not yet." He turned, set the rifle on the table, and sat across from her. "You ever wonder," he said, "what might have happened if you hadn't left?" She smiled weakly. "Every day. I thought you'd forget me by now." "I tried," he said. "Didn't take." Her hand moved toward his on the table, slow, uncertain. For a moment he didn't pull away. The warmth of her skin, even through the cold, carried something he hadn't felt in years. Not forgiveness, just something alive. "I was wrong, Caleb," she said, voice shaking. "About everything. I thought love was what men could buy, not what they could carry." He looked up at her, eyes full of something that might have been pity, or love worn too thin to name. "Then maybe you finally learned something worth keeping." Thunder rolled again, closer this time. She stood, walked to the window, and wiped the fog from the glass. The riders were moving now, 3 figures cutting through the rain, their silhouettes like shadows given purpose. She turned to him, fear in her voice. "You can't fight them all." Caleb rose, calm as a man already halfway to his fate. "Wasn't planning to. Just need to give you enough time to ride south." She shook her head violently. "No, I won't run again." "I can't." He met her eyes with steady quiet. You don't get to fix the past by dying in it. A tear rolled down her cheek. Then let me stand with you. He hesitated, just long enough for her to see the war inside him, then nodded once. All right, he said, but you do exactly as I say. She picked up the revolver and handed it back to him. Her fingers brushed his, trembling. The storm outside had softened to drizzle, the kind of rain that comes after blood's already been spilled. Whatever happens, she whispered, I'm not leaving you again. Caleb looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman she'd been before the money, before the lies, before everything that broke them. Then he said, quiet as a prayer, let's see if dawn still belongs to the living. The rain had stopped, but the world still smelled like it, mud, smoke, and the kind of silence that comes before a reckoning. Dawn bled slowly across the plains, painting the clouds with the faintest light, as if heaven itself wasn't sure whether to wake. Caleb stood in the doorway of the cabin, rifle across his arm, revolver holstered at his hip. The land stretched out before him, wide, empty, his since before she left. Now it might be his grave. She stood behind him, shawl pulled tight, eyes fixed on the ridgeline. The riders were there, 3 of them, dark shapes against the light, coming slow and deliberate. Caleb, she whispered. They won't let you talk your way out. He didn't answer, just breathed in the morning air like a man memorizing it. Sometimes words come after bullets, he said softly. Sometimes they don't come at all. The first rider called out as they reached the yard. The same tall man from before, Mercer's enforcer, with eyes as cold as the silver on his belt buckle. Morning, Holt, he said. Nice day to clear your conscience. Caleb stepped off the porch, calm, boots sinking into the wet dirt. You boys sure do rise early for men without souls. The man smiled faintly. We came for her, not your sermons. Behind Caleb, she stepped into view. Her hair clung damp to her shoulders, face pale but steady. Then you came too late, she said. I'm done running. The tall man's grin sharpened. You think it matters what you're done with? Mercer's blood don't wash off easy. He turned his gaze to Caleb. Step aside. Holt, you don't want to die over a woman who already buried you once. Caleb's hand twitched near his holster, not in anger, but in patience. You see, that's where you're wrong, he said. She didn't bury me. She just taught me how deep a man can fall. The air grew still. The second rider shifted in his saddle. The third spit into the dirt. The sound was small, ugly, final. Caleb's voice dropped low. I'm not giving her up. The tall man sighed, disappointed. Didn't figure you would. The gunfire came fast. 2 shots cracked through the still morning, echoing off the canyon walls. The horses reared, smoke rising from the revolvers. When the echoes faded, Caleb was still standing. One of the riders wasn't. The other was cursing, clutching a bleeding arm. Caleb's breath came shallow. A line of red streaked down his sleeve, just a graze, but enough to sting like truth. He called out, voice hoarse. You can still ride away. The tall man just smiled, reloading slow. Ain't my style. Before the next shot could fire, she stepped forward, barehanded, trembling but fierce. He's not the one who killed Mercer, she shouted. It was me. Caleb turned, stunned. What the hell are you? Let it end with me, she said, voice breaking. You don't owe me this. The tall man laughed, cold and cruel. Lady, you just made it easier. He raised his gun, and that's when Caleb moved. Not out of thought. Out of something older, an instinct or love, or both tangled together in the same doomed breath. One last shot tore the quiet apart. When the smoke cleared, the tall man lay face down in the mud, his gun half buried. The other riders were already turning, spurring their horses hard, vanishing into the wet horizon. Caleb stood motionless, chest heaving, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. She rushed to him, hands shaking, eyes wide with disbelief. You're hit, she whispered. He smiled faintly, teeth red at the corner. Only enough to remember. They sank to the ground together, the wet earth soaking through their clothes. The smell of gunpowder still lingered, mingling with the sweet scent of rain. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder. You shouldn't have done it, she whispered. He looked at her. Really looked. The way a man does when time finally slows down long enough to mean something. Wasn't doing it for you, he said softly. Was doing it for who you used to be? She broke then, the sobs quiet, broken, carried away by the morning wind. He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. Get the horse. Ride south. Don't stop till you see the river. There's a town there. Tell him your name's Anna Carter. Don't look back. She shook her head through tears. Not without you. Don't argue, he said gently. I made my choice. You make yours. She stared at him, desperate. Why are you still helping me? He smiled faintly. Because someone's got to remember what mercy looks like. The light grew stronger then, soft gold spilling over the plains, catching the wet grass, the smoke, the edges of everything that hurt. By the time she reached the ridge, she looked back once. Caleb was still sitting by the cabin, the rifle across his knees, watching the sunrise. He looked peaceful. Years later, when folks spoke of the Holt ranch, they said it stood empty, reclaimed by wind and silence. But sometimes, travelers swore they saw a man out front at dawn, hat pulled low, watching the sun climb over the plains like it still meant something. And somewhere beyond that horizon, a woman with a new name carried a memory that wouldn't die. The moment he took the revolver she'd handed him at dawn, and changed her forever.